The jackhammers had barely started at 9 a.m. when Patricia appeared at the edge of Michael's property. She wore designer sunglasses despite the overcast sky and clutched a leather portfolio like a shield. Michael spotted her from his home office window and sighed. He'd hoped to avoid this confrontation, but it seemed inevitable. "Morning, Patricia," he said, stepping outside to intercept her before she could harass the workers. "Is there something I can help you with?" "This is unacceptable," she declared, marching up his driveway and flipping open her portfolio. She produced a color printout of property values with certain numbers highlighted in neon yellow. "My realtor says pools increase home values by 7%. Did you even consider your neighbors before making such a drastic decision?" Michael took a deep breath. "Actually, I did research this thoroughly. In our climate, I've already spoken with Trevor from the HOA," Patricia interrupted, her voice rising to compete with the construction noise. "There are bylaws about maintaining neighborhood aesthetics." Michael was calculating his response when a voice called out from behind Patricia. "Good morning. Quite the project you've got going, Michael." Both turned to see Eleanor Simmons, Michael's next-door neighbor, walking toward them. The retired judge moved with the deliberate confidence of someone who had spent decades commanding courtrooms. At 73, she still had a sharp mind and sharper tongue. Patricia's expression flickered with uncertainty. Eleanor's reputation for cutting through nonsense was well known in the neighborhood. "Actually," Eleanor interjected before Michael could respond, "that statistic only applies to areas with year-round warm weather. In our climate, pools are considered a maintenance burden by most buyers." She glanced at Patricia's printout. "And if I'm not mistaken, those figures are from Miami real estate trends. Hardly applicable here." Patricia shifted her weight, momentarily flustered by the unexpected opposition. "Well, that's beside the point. My children have swimming privileges here. It's an unwritten agreement." Michael blinked in surprise. "Funny," he replied, finding his voice. "Since you filed a noise complaint the only time I invited the neighborhood kids over for a pool party. 3 years ago, if I recall correctly." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "I remember that." The police officer seemed quite confused about being called to a Sunday afternoon gathering that ended at 6 p.m. Red-faced, Patricia clutched her portfolio tighter. "The bylaws clearly state." "The bylaws state nothing about pool removal," Eleanor interrupted gently. "I was on the committee that drafted them. There's a difference between not being allowed to build certain structures and being required to maintain existing ones." Patricia's mouth opened and closed without sound. Then she gathered herself. "This isn't over. I'll be discussing this with my attorney." She turned on her heel and marched back toward her house, stumbling slightly on the uneven sidewalk. Once Patricia was out of earshot, Eleanor turned to Michael with a smile. "Sorry to interrupt, but I saw her heading over with that portfolio and thought you might appreciate some backup." "I definitely did. Thank you," Michael said sincerely. "Was that true about the property values?" "Every word," Eleanor confirmed. "My son's a real estate appraiser. But here's something interesting." She lowered her voice. "She doesn't have an attorney. But I do know she's planning to sell her house next spring, which explains her sudden concern about property values." This revelation gave Michael pause. Patricia wasn't just being difficult, she had financial motives. "How do you know she's selling?" he asked. "Book club gossip. Her sister mentioned it last month," Eleanor explained. "Patricia hasn't officially announced it yet, but she's already interviewed agents." Michael glanced toward Patricia's house, where she stood in her front window, phone pressed to her ear. "The game has changed," he murmured. Eleanor patted his arm. "Just be careful. When people feel their money is threatened, they rarely respond rationally." She glanced at the construction crew. "And maybe invest in some security cameras, just in case." As Eleanor walked away, Michael felt a mix of gratitude and unease. What had started as a simple home improvement project was rapidly becoming something far more complicated. Michael Evans stood at his kitchen window, coffee in hand, staring at the cracked, leaf-filled swimming pool that had become the bane of his existence. 15 years ago, it had been the centerpiece of summer barbecues and his children's birthday parties. Now it was a $5,000 a year money pit collecting dead leaves and memories. He sighed, taking another sip of his coffee, which had grown cold. The morning sun highlighted the pool's floors, the hairline cracks in the concrete, the stained liner, and the rusted ladder that needed replacing. The pool equipment shed wasn't faring much better, with its peeling paint and sagging door. Another repair bill waiting to happen, he muttered to himself. His phone pinged with a notification. His homeowner's insurance company had sent an email, and as expected, it wasn't good news. They were hiking his premium again, citing the pool as a liability risk, the third increase in 2 years. Michael ran the numbers in his head, between the insurance, chemicals, electricity for the pump, and the professional openings and closings. He was throwing money at something nobody used anymore. The final straw came when his daughter Sophie called from college that evening. "How's the mechanical engineering program going?" Michael asked, settling onto his couch. "Brutal, but amazing," Sophie replied. "I'm designing a sustainable water system for my final project, which reminds me, what are you going to do about that pool?" "What about it?" Michael asked, though he knew exactly what she meant. "Dad, nobody's used that pool in 3 years. The last time I was home, it had more frogs than water. Turn it into something you'll actually enjoy." Sophie's practical assessment hit home. His children had grown up, moved out, and moved on. Perhaps it was time he did too. The next day, Michael began researching his options. He spent hours watching pool removal videos, reading about conversion projects, and scrolling through landscaping websites. After reaching out to 5 contractors, he settled on Desert Oasis Landscaping, a company with excellent reviews and a portfolio full of impressive transformations. "We could do a xeriscape garden," suggested Leela, the designer who came to assess the space. "Drought-resistant plants, a fire pit in place of the deep end, and a pergola where the shallow end is now. Low maintenance, environmentally friendly, and about $200 a year in upkeep versus your current expenses." Michael signed the contract that afternoon. For the first time in years, he felt excited about his backyard. The day before work was scheduled to begin, Michael hand-delivered notices to his neighbors. For most, he included a decent bottle of wine and an invitation to a garden-warming party once the project was completed. They responded with enthusiasm and understanding. "About time," said Ron from across the street. "I've been thinking about doing the same with mine. Can't wait to see how it turns out," Maria next door told him with a smile. But when it came to 118 Sycamore Lane, Michael's approach changed. Patricia Winters, whom the neighborhood kids had nicknamed Karen for her constant complaints, received just the notice. No wine, no friendly chat. Michael had learned his lesson after she'd reported him to the HOA when his Christmas lights stayed up 2 days into January. She'd also complained about his garbage cans being visible from the street. They weren't, and had once called animal control because his dog barked at a squirrel. As Michael slipped the envelope into Patricia's mailbox, he noticed her peering through her blinds. He'd offered a polite wave, but the blinds snapped shut in response. "Well," he thought, walking back to his house, "at least I've done my due diligence." Little did he know that his simple home improvement project was about to unleash a suburban war. What began as complaints evolved into psychological warfare within days. Michael woke at 2 a.m. to find his backyard bathed in artificial daylight. Patricia had installed industrial-grade floodlights aimed directly at the construction site, mounted on her side of the property line. For security purposes, she explained sweetly when the city inspector came to investigate Michael's complaint. "With all the strangers coming and going next door, I don't feel safe." The inspector, unable to find a specific code violation, left with a shrug and a sympathetic glance at Michael. By day 4, Patricia had reported Michael for every possible violation: noise, dust, working hours, requiring multiple inspector visits that found nothing wrong but delayed progress and cost him money as workers stood idle. "She's relentless," Michael told Leila from Desert Oasis Landscaping. "I'm sorry about the delays." "Not your fault," Leila assured him. "We've dealt with difficult neighbors before, but she's gunning for the championship title." The situation took a bizarre turn on Saturday morning. Michael was enjoying his coffee on the temporary patio he'd set up when his dog Bruno, a gentle Labrador, began digging frantically near the property line shared with Patricia. Normally, Michael would have called him off, but something about the dog's determination made him curious. "What you find, buddy?" Michael asked, walking over. Bruno backed away, proudly revealing his discovery, a small wireless camera disguised as a garden gnome, partially buried among the border plants. Michael carefully extracted the device. It was sophisticated, weatherproof, wireless, with a memory card. The timestamp on the recordings showed Patricia had planted it after dark 2 days earlier. "This is beyond ridiculous," Michael told his sister Kate during their weekly video call, showing her the camera. "She's actually spying on me. There are hours of footage of my backyard on this thing." Kate's face darkened on the screen. "That's not just annoying, Michael. That's illegal in most states. Document everything," his sister advised. "Take photos, keep the camera as evidence, and start a log of every incident. She's giving you exactly what you need for a harassment case." Michael followed her advice, creating a detailed record of Patricia's escalating behavior. He installed security cameras of his own, visible ones, with proper signage, and continued the pool removal project despite the obstacles. Meanwhile, Patricia had formed an unlikely alliance with Trevor Watson, the Neighborhood Association president who had a history of power trips. Though Eleanor had correctly stated there were no bylaws preventing pool removal, Trevor had always enjoyed flexing what little authority he had. Michael spotted them in Patricia's driveway one evening, huddled over papers spread across the hood of Trevor's luxury sedan. Through his kitchen window, he watched them pointing at his property, nodding, and making notes. The next day, flyers appeared in everyone's mailboxes announcing an emergency neighborhood association meeting to discuss property value protection measures. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, when most homeowners would be at work and unable to attend. Michael took the day off to attend, discovering only 5 other neighbors present: Patricia, Trevor, and 3 retirees who came to all meetings out of boredom. The proposal on the table was a new aesthetic preservation clause, specifically targeting pool removals and major landscape changes, requiring committee approval retroactively. "This is obviously targeted at me," Michael stated calmly when given the chance to speak, "and retroactive rules aren't enforceable. You can't change the rules after I've started the project with proper permits." Trevor cleared his throat. "As president, I have emergency powers to enact temporary measures for community protection." "That's not in the bylaws either," Michael countered. The meeting ended with Trevor forcing a vote among the sparse attendants. The measure passed 4-2, with only Michael and one of the retirees opposing. 2 days later, Michael arrived home to find a certified letter containing the new clause and a $500 non-compliance fee. Inside was a handwritten note: "Perhaps we can discuss dropping this fee over coffee." It was signed with Patricia's phone number and a smiley face. The war had officially escalated. The neighborhood's annual block party couldn't have come at a more tense time. Normally, Michael looked forward to the community gathering, with its potluck dishes and friendly conversation. This year, he considered skipping it entirely, but Eleanor convinced him otherwise. "Don't let her isolate you," she advised. "The neighborhood needs to see you're not the villain she's painting you to be." The event was held in the community park, tables laden with casseroles and desserts. Michael brought his famous smoked brisket, which was always a hit. To his surprise, several neighbors approached him with supportive comments about his ongoing project. "My cousin did the same thing," Ron told him. "Best decision he ever made. His new garden looks fantastic." Further validation came when Maria, the block party organizer, called for everyone's attention and announced the community recognitions. This year's Volunteer of the Year award goes to Michael Evans for his work rehabilitating the community playground and organizing the spring cleanup. "Michael, would you come up here?" Applause filled the air as Michael made his way to the front, accepting the modest plaque with a genuine smile. As he thanked everyone, a commotion erupted from the back. Patricia staggered to her feet, wine glass in hand, her movements unsteady. "He's destroying our property values," she slurred, pointing an accusatory finger. The crowd fell silent, all eyes turning toward her. Did you know he's turning his backyard into a desert? Michael stood frozen, acutely aware of the uncomfortable expressions around him. I've had to increase my anxiety medication because of the constant construction noise. Patricia continued, her voice rising. And the board is letting him get away with it because he's Volunteer of the Year. She made exaggerated air quotes, spilling wine on her blouse. What Patricia didn't realize was that her real estate agent, Diane, was among the guests. Diane had been showing houses in the neighborhood for 15 years and knew everyone. Actually, Diane spoke up, setting down her plate. I've shown 3 houses on the street in the past month, and buyers are more interested in low-maintenance yards than pools. Pools are often seen as a liability. A murmur of agreement passed through the crowd. Trevor, who had been standing near Patricia, subtly edged away, clearly sensing the turning tide. Humiliated and contradicted, Patricia's face contorted. She threw her wine glass on the ground, the plastic tumbler bouncing harmlessly on the grass. You'll all regret this when your houses lose value, she declared before storming away. The party continued, with Patricia's outburst becoming the subject of concerned whispers. Michael tried to enjoy himself, but a sense of unease followed him home. That unease proved justified the next morning when he stepped outside to find his construction supplies scattered across his lawn. Bags of soil had been slashed open, plants uprooted, and the partially completed irrigation system damaged. Michael immediately checked his security footage. The cameras had captured Patricia at 2 a.m., methodically vandalizing the site, muttering to herself as she destroyed thousands of dollars worth of materials and work. With a heavy heart, he called Patricia, hoping to resolve this before involving authorities. I have video of you destroying my property last night, he said calmly when she'd answered. I'd rather not take this to the police, but... You have nothing, she hissed, her voice venomous, and I'm on my way over to finish what I started. The line went dead. Michael immediately called the police, explaining the situation and the threat. He then warned the construction workers, who had just arrived, to stay in their vehicles. 20 minutes later, Patricia's luxury SUV screeched to a halt in front of Michael's house. She emerged with a garden shovel and marched directly onto his lawn, narrowly missing a worker who tried to intercept her. Without hesitation, she began frantically digging in the excavated pool area, screaming about finding evidence of environmental contamination and illegal disposal. When Michael approached, keeping a safe distance, Patricia turned the shovel toward him like a weapon. Don't come any closer, she shouted, eyes wild. I have rights. This is for the good of the neighborhood. In the distance, Michael heard police sirens approaching. The police arrived with surprising speed. Michael later learned that Patricia had called them too, claiming he was destroying protected neighborhood property. Officer Rodriguez and his partner assessed the scene. Patricia wielding a shovel in the excavated pool area, surrounded by bewildered construction workers and scattered materials. Ma'am, you need to put down the shovel and step out of the excavation, Rodriguez said firmly, approaching with caution. Not until he agrees to restore the pool, Patricia demanded, tightening her grip. This is destruction of neighborhood assets. I've documented everything. Rodriguez had been on the force for 15 years and recognized the signs of someone beyond reasonable discussion. He maintained a calm demeanor as his partner circled around to approach from another angle. Patricia, Michael tried once more. This has gone too far. You trespassed and vandalized my property. On camera, please put down the shovel. You've ruined everything, she shouted, her voice cracking with emotion that seemed disproportionate to the situation. What happened next shocked everyone. A silver Mercedes pulled up, and Patricia's husband David emerged. David Winters was rarely seen at neighborhood functions. His job as a pharmaceutical sales rep kept him traveling most weeks. The few times Michael had interacted with him, David had been polite but distant. Patricia, enough, he said quietly, approaching the edge of the excavation. Patricia froze, clearly surprised by his appearance. David, you're supposed to be in Phoenix. I came back early when Trevor called me, David explained, his voice tired. He told me about your scheme to pressure Michael into selling his house at a discount so we could buy it for Kyle's family. The small crowd that had gathered fell silent. Patricia's face drained of color. Is that what this was about? Michael asked, pieces falling into place. Patricia's son Kyle had recently announced he was moving back to town with his family. David looked apologetic as he helped Patricia climb out of the pit. We're getting divorced, he said quietly. Patricia didn't want anyone to know yet, but she's been struggling. This isn't just about your pool. Kyle's return was supposed to be our fresh start, a chance to fix things. Officer Rodriguez gently guided Patricia to the police cruiser. We still need to address the vandalism and trespassing, he explained to David. After a lengthy discussion, instead of pressing charges that could have resulted in significant legal consequences for Patricia, Michael agreed to a community resolution. Patricia would pay for the damages, seek counseling, and stay away from his property. The Neighborhood Association, under scrutiny after Trevor's role in the scheme came to light, disbanded the emergency clause and issued a formal apology. 6 months later, Michael's transformation was complete. The former pool area had become an elegant xeriscaped garden with native plants, a stone fire pit, and comfortable seating beneath a vine-covered pergola. Solar lighting gave the space a magical quality in the evenings. To celebrate the completion, Michael hosted a garden-warming party. Nearly everyone from the neighborhood attended, admiring the sustainable design and peaceful atmosphere. Among the guests was Patricia, notably subdued in a simple blue dress, who arrived with Eleanor. In the months following the incident, she had begun therapy, finalized her divorce, and stepped back from neighborhood politics. She approached Michael privately as the party wound down. My therapist suggested I make amends, she said stiffly, handing him an envelope. Inside was a handwritten apology and a gift certificate to a garden center. Michael nodded, accepting both. The new plants will look nice under the pergola. Would you like to see what we've done with the space? As they walked through the garden, Patricia admitted quietly, it's actually much nicer than the pool ever was. Sometimes, Michael reflected as he watched the gathering from his new patio. The deepest conflicts arise not from what we tear down, but from what others fear we might build in its place.